Good evening, everyone. I say everyone, assuming that somebody's popping in for tonight's tonight's live show here with Chiefs Digest. Matt Derrick here, the lead beat writer, publisher for Chiefs Digest, and we'll see who pops up, who maybe will join in later. But thought I would just do the live stream tonight. I'm trying to get a little bit more into the rhythm of doing a few of these, hopefully getting into a regular schedule for everybody. But there's been a lot of moves in Chiefs Kingdom this week, in the last couple of days, maybe more moves on the horizon. The NFL trade deadline is coming up at the end of the month as well, so there can always be a lot of activity at that point as well. And here to answer your questions. So if there's anybody has got any questions would like to answer tonight, let me know. I will try to touch on some of the topics going on around the Chiefs right now. But if there's anything in particular you want to know about, maybe some players that you're not seeing as much of, maybe some updates that you'd like to get on some practice squad players, anything like that, let me know. I would be glad to share with you and tell you what I know and what I have seen. So let's obviously start off with the big news. Obviously, Mecole Hardman coming to Kansas City. And I mean, to me, it's a move that's not hard to like. It was a very low-cost move. The Chiefs, the exchange with the Jets, was literally sending a sixth-round pick for a seventh-round pick. Being able to make sure that the Chiefs didn't lose a pick was a very big deal. And obviously, you've seen the success that Brett Veach and his staff has had in the seventh round. I mean, making sure that you still have that pick doesn't bother me at all. And when you think about the fact that, hey, even in 2025, I still think there's a reasonable chance that the Jets will be drafting at the beginning of round 7, and the Chiefs will be drafting at the end of round 6 with the comp picks in between. It's really not much compensation to give up for Mecole Hardman, and the contract is very favorable as well. You know, he signed a deal, was reported at $4 million. Really was, I think, more like about $3.5 million with some incentives that could have bumped it up to $4 million. Only a $1.08 million base, and the Chiefs are only responsible for a prorated version of that. So Chiefs are getting Mecole Hardman for a handful of draft spots and $720,000 plus any roster bonuses or incentives that he makes, which could be a few $100,000 more. To me, it's a very low-cost move. I know there's been a lot of speculation about, hey, does this affect the Chiefs' compensation pick that they could possibly get? And yes, I mean, there is a possibility that reacquiring Mecole could affect that. The Chiefs were projected at one point to possibly get 2 compensation picks in next year's NFL draft. One essentially for losing Andrew Wiley, one for losing Juju Smith-Schuster. The way that the draft pick compensation meshes out sometimes is a little odd, but Mecole coming back ends up getting treated as a gain for the Chiefs. They get credit for losing him, but they also get credit for gaining him. So basically, Mecole transfers himself out. The question was whether or not the Chiefs were going to be able to get a compensation pick for Juju Smith-Schuster. And we'll see. I mean, it could very well end up costing the Chiefs a compensation pick. It might be a 5th, and it could have been a 6th. Obviously, they don't lose any draft pick with the compensation deals. So, yeah, I mean, they might end up losing it. It's a possibility, too, that when the formula finishes with the way that the points are given out, that Juju might not qualify for a compensation pick. So we don't know. So I wouldn't get too upset about it. I mean, honestly, if the Chiefs ended up giving a 6th-round pick and a few draft positions for Mecole, I think it's a low-cost move. So I'm really interested to see what becomes of this, especially with the way the Chiefs' wide receiver room has performed at this point in the season. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, they could use someone with some experience in the offense and a different piece. And I was very interested in something that Mecole said today during his press conference to us, which was really talking about the missed opportunity that he felt that he had last year, because it was the first year without Tyreek, and and he was healthy to start the season. He was probably playing his best football when he got hurt against the Titans. But I think that Mecole in his first 3 seasons with the Chiefs, remember, he was drafted, in the wake of the Chiefs, not knowing if they were going to have Tyreek Hill. That was the draft night that the allegations came out about Tyreek Hill, and there was a lot of questions about whether he might be suspended and a lot of issues in that 2019 season. And in some ways, I mean, I think that, privately, the Chiefs will admit that, hey, drafting Mecole was a reaction to that. They might have gone a different direction before those allegations came out. They drafted Mecole Hardman to largely play the position that Tyreek Hill played. And Tyreek Hill then played it for Mecole's first 3 years in Kansas City. So last year was really going to be his first chance to play the spot in the offense that he was drafted to play and was probably best suited to play, and was having his moments last year before the injury. Now, does that position still exist in the Kansas City offense? Not in its same form. So I'll be interested to see how the Chiefs do use him. The one benefit that Mecole has is that he knows all three positions, so they can rotate him inside and outside. Yes, there's a few new wrinkles in the offense. There's some new terminology. There's things for him to pick up, but it really shouldn't be that hard. I think he should be up to speed in a couple of weeks of being somebody that you can plug in just about anywhere. And obviously, Mecole's speed, as Dave Toe pointed out, he's now the fastest guy on the team. So it does bring a different dimension. He and Patrick do have a relationship. So Patrick knows his speed. He knows the timing. Yeah, there have been some issues in the past, but I don't see how the Chiefs could have passed this up. I mean, it's really a good opportunity for them. One of the other reasons why we wanted to do this live stream tonight also was because, of course, obviously the Chiefs need to make some moves, not only for Mecole Hardman, but for Charles Omenihu coming in. And one move was a small surprise. One move was probably not much of a surprise. As of this morning, when the Chiefs put their roster out, they did have 8 wide receivers on it. And so even for the Chiefs, that's a lot of receivers. So waiving Montrell Washington was not a big surprise because I think there's a pretty reasonable chance that Montrell will clear waivers, which means that they can re-sign him to the practice squad. Teams have until 3 p.m. Friday to claim either Montrell Washington or Keandre Coburn, who was the other player placed on waivers today. If either of those players both clear waivers, Chiefs are interested in bringing them both back, they could sign them as early as basically 3:01 p.m. Central Time, Kansas City, if they clear waivers. And if that's the case, Montrell Washington could get back onto the practice squad. He could get elevated on Saturday and play Sunday. If, especially if the Chiefs don't decide to bring Mecole for active on Sunday, give him the day off. Mecole did talk about not wanting to be a distraction this week, that the Chiefs were already in the middle of game planning. He doesn't necessarily want to take away plays or snaps or packages from somebody else who was already preparing to play that role. Mecole didn't get in until Thursday. So even though he knows this offense, I think he could absolutely step in. It's not something that, sounds like he's eager to do. I think he would actually be fine if the Chiefs want to give him a week off just to get acclimated and let the other guys do their work and give him a week to reacquaint himself with the offense and the terminology and some of the schemes that the Chiefs are running right now. I think he'd be okay with that. And Montrell Washington has been doing a fine job. I mean, yes, he had some bobbles on Thursday night last week against the Broncos. That was his really, toughest game yet in those windy conditions in Arrowhead, trying to catch that ball on a night where the wind was blowing, 20 to 30 miles an hour. It's a challenging environment in Arrowhead. I mean, you saw the Broncos certainly had some problems with in their kicking game. So it doesn't concern me going forward. I know Dave Tobe's not concerned about him. I think the Chiefs would be fine if Montrell Washington was their return specialist on Sunday. We'll see. I think Mecole's ready. He's healthy. He's obviously been rested because he hasn't been getting a lot of work with the Jets. I think he's physically ready to get in there as soon as possible. It's just going to be how quickly the Chiefs want to rush him. The other player to mention briefly that the Chiefs did put on waivers was Keandre Coburn, and that was the one that was a bit of a mild surprise for me. I thought that with Charles Omenihu coming back, certainly there was a possibility that the Chiefs would place one of their defensive linemen on waivers, and most likely it was going to be one of the rookies. I didn't think they would risk losing a guy like Malik Herring, a veteran who's got some experience. Neil Farrell, who they traded for, didn't think that they were going to risk that. So it was probably going to be Coburn or defensive end B.J. Thompson. I was a little surprised with Coburn. I think that probably at the end of the day, the reasoning, certainly Steve Spagnuolo today said that He wants KC back in KC. They do like him. There's a lot of upside. You know, I really got the sense that, you know, with his size, his physicalness, there's a lot of similarities between him and Colin Saunders in both, you know, maybe good and bad ways. And one thing the Chiefs really learned about Colin his rookie season, when he was pushed into early duty, was that he wore down a little bit during his rookie season. And I certainly got the sense that that's a little bit what the Chiefs were doing with Coburn, was, you know, making this a bit of a redshirt year for him. I think they'd be very comfortable sneaking him onto the practice squad, because I think that they always felt like the second half of this season, or even 2024, was really the best time for Coburn to contribute. So I'm a little surprised that they're just taking the chance of losing him, because team might be interested in him. But you know, they're hoping that they get him back, and so it was a calculated risk that they took. I think they certainly felt like it was more likely that he could sneak through than maybe B.J. Thompson. So that's, I think, the reasoning why they went with the decision of waiving Coburn. That obviously frees up Charles Omenihu, and I've had a lot of questions about, you know, what to expect from Omenihu this week. On the one side, well rested. I mean, he hasn't had to play for 6 weeks, but there's going to be some rust there. You know, we've seen it. I mean, you saw even with Nick Bolton. I almost call him Michael Bolton, for crying out loud. With Nick Bolton, you saw a little bit of a rust. He shook it off pretty quickly, but that was only 3 games. You know, for Coburn, it's 6. It's been a little bit longer of a layoff. He is certainly fired up to be in there. You know, I think it was Joe Cullen was talking about how he was in Friday morning as soon as he was allowed to be back in the building again full time. So he's absolutely ready to go. The Chiefs made a point of making sure that Omenihu got a lot of work during training camp and during the preseason once that suspension came down. They gave him more snaps, more time than, you know, he would normally get, so he could bank that time and be ready for when he came back. So I'm expecting him to have at least some role on Sunday, and really anything that he can do to bring down the snap counts for Mike Danna and George Karlaftis, I think is good. Both those guys are playing an awful lot, especially the last few weeks. And, you know, even looking at their snap counts for the season, they're up in the high 70% range as far as snaps. And that is an awful lot. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dana was at 90% last week against Denver. And, you know, for Joe Cullen, who likes and preaches a rotation on the defensive line, that's a lot of work. And, you know, and today he likened it, you know, what he wants to be able to do is make it more akin to shift changes, you know, that he's making moves en masse and bringing in fresh legs consistently. So I think it'll take some time to ramp up, and certainly you're going to see them using Omenihu in the same way that they have used some other guys, as far as, you know, moving around that defensive line, playing inside and outside. The one thing that I was most intrigued about during training camp, though, was that third down package, the NASCAR package, if you will, with the Chiefs would go to on third down and in obvious passing situations, was Chris Jones and George Karlaftis on the ends, Mike Dana and Charles Omenihu on the inside. That I would like to see sooner than later. I'd be really interested to see how that line looks and how Omenihu fits in. Obviously, Steve Spagnuolo has some concerns about disrupting the chemistry of that defensive line, but I don't think that's a serious issue. I mean, it certainly seemed like Omenihu was fitting in very well during the offseason and during preseason and training camp. So to me, it's just a matter of getting his legs under him and how quickly he can start taking a little bit of the load off these other guys, especially on the ends, because Karlaftis and Dana have been playing a lot of snaps. Just looking through the conversation here, looking for some of the questions that you all have, and Chad asking about adding another wide receiver. And I'm never going to rule out Brett Veach making any moves. The one thing that's going to be obviously the biggest sticking point today, the Chiefs have $3.2 million in cap space, and that's before Mecole Hardman's contract hits the salary cap. That has not been processed as far as this number goes, and this is going to be different than the number you see at Spotrac and Over the Cap. Those sites do a great job of estimating impact of the salary cap. But the NFLPA, their website that they post daily updates, those actually come from the NFL directly. Those aren't estimates. Those are actually based on the real contract. So I'm always going to go with the NFLPA number because that is the absolute most accurate, most up to date, and most realistic number. So that right now shows the Chiefs at 3.2. The Mecole Hardman deal will change that a little bit. Charles Omenihu will change that a little bit because when he was on the suspended list, his number didn't count against the salary cap. So they have to have a little bit of adjustments there. What do you have left to go after another wide receiver? The answer is not much. Now, there are some veteran players, and I hesitate to mention DeAndre Hopkins, but he's one of them, that have contracts that are favorable. I just don't know if the Titans are really interested in making a move. I mean, they would have to eat a lot of salary, and the contract was built for that. But I'm not convinced that they want to give up on the season yet. Other names like Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, that's a different critter because he's got a big contract number, and he would have to rework that to a point where I'm not sure that it's realistically possible. And certainly not in a way that the Chiefs are comfortable with, because Brown's going to want his money. And if I'm not mistaken, and I can look it up real quick here and see. I want to say that Marquise Brown's contract is around $13 million for this season. And a player of his caliber is not going to be taking a pay cut to go anywhere. Even if it's to come to Kansas City. I mean, he's still a young guy. He knows he can. And yeah, his base salary is 13.4 this year. That's what would come with him. Yes, it's the prorated version of that, but that's still a number the Chiefs can't afford. So without really juggling the salary cap, they really can't fit him in it unless there's a player going back for him to make the money count even. But really, that player's hard to find too, because unless it's a player with a 1-year contract, Chiefs would have to eat some salary. So that I find hard to see happening. Not ruling it out, but unless it's a player, and I really feel like that the acquisition of Mecole probably makes Marquise Brown kind of, I don't want to say irrelevant, but redundant maybe is a better way to put it, especially because he's not going to be familiar with the offense, and there is no bigger skeptic than me when it comes to bringing in receivers into an Andy Reid offense midseason. It's low expectations. And so, unless you're bringing in somebody like I would say a DeAndre Hopkins, who is in a different level, in a different entirely category. But if you're bringing in most receivers, what are you hoping to get out of them? A couple of 100 yards? I mean, that's literally, I think, the only thing that you could get, even from a really good receiver. What you got from Kadarius Toney, to me, is the high water mark of getting any receiver coming in midseason to an Andy Reid offense. There's just too many moving parts to pick up unless they're familiar with the schemes and the concepts and the terminology, and like Mecole, has at least a base of the playbook, an understanding of a good chunk of it. So that, I think, is more challenging. I know one of the other reasons why I said there's several reasons why I was doing the live chat tonight, and one of them is coming up on the questions here from Tyler. Any word on Frank? Because we can safely say, based on the source himself, Frank Clark, that Frank Clark was planning on coming to Kansas City on Thursday. Sounds like he might be even meeting up with some people on Friday, and it's strongly suggesting that he will be visiting the Chiefs on Friday. There were some rumors that he would be in the building on Thursday. He was not in the building. He could have come in after 5 o'clock. If so, he would be on the Friday report as far as free agents who are coming in for visits, as far as that goes. So it's entirely possible he's talking with the Chiefs tonight. But if Frank returns to Kansas City, if there is a reunion between the Chiefs and Frank Clark, I would not expect it to be in the similar relationship that he's had with the Chiefs as he has in the past. Frank's at a different point in his career now, and I think that he's probably getting a little bit of experience. I think he got a little bit of it during free agency, that the market might not have been what he thought it would be for him at this point in his career, before he ended up signing with Denver. Denver obviously tried to look for a trade partner, couldn't find anybody that was interested. Could have been some teams that just were not willing to give up the capital who would be in interest from Frank Clark right now. But, honestly, I mean, and it's from where the Chiefs are at this point, as much as I think Frank Clark's, from what I have seen and from covering him in the last couple of years, and and this is saving any judgment off the field about some of the issues that Frank has had, which has obviously been discussed ad nauseum and has gone back for a long time, and I think if you want to have some critiques about Frank off the field, I think that's absolutely legitimate. But, on the field and in the locker room, Frank's been a good presence. I mean, he really has. So I don't think that there would be any concerns about that. But I think, practice squad is really what's most appropriate for Frank Clark at this point in his career. Would he be somebody that you would be willing to risk losing a young guy like a BJ Thompson, or a little more experienced veteran like a Malik Herring? Possibly. But you also don't want to disrupt the chemistry, and that was another one of those things that Steve Spagnuolo talked about today, and I felt like that might have even been a little bit between the lines on Frank, as far as the Chiefs don't feel like that they're in the need to completely blow up that defensive line room and the defensive end group just to bring in Frank. So if he comes in for the physical on Friday, clears that, I mean, I do think there's a place in Kansas City for Frank Clark. I think right now it's best on the practice squad. The Chiefs do have one open spot. There was a question there from 1 Hourhead Drive. The Chiefs do have one spot. They currently have 16 players, but Chu Godric is an international pathway player, so he does not count towards the 16-player limit. So the Chiefs can actually have 17 players on the practice squad this year with Chu on there, which means they do have one spot free. Obviously, they've got Montrell Washington and possibly Keandre Coburn who they want to come back. So they're already short a spot. They'd have to be making some moves. But especially even if the Chiefs were in a position where they were just like, hey, we want Frank for injury insurance, and maybe he could be back on the 53 down the road. To me, he's at a point in his career that if you can fit him onto your practice squad, convince him to come in for that money for now, and maybe say, hey Frank, as soon as there's an opportunity, we'll get you up there. I think that would work, but I would have some serious qualms about trying to fit Frank Clark into the defensive line room as it is right now, because it's one of those things. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and you're already going to be disrupting it a bit with bringing in Keandre, or excuse me, with bringing in Charles Omenihu. So, and even though I think that'll be a positive, I don't really think there's a reason to completely revamp what you're doing. And as Cody notes, Frank would be a huge boost to BJ Thompson and Felix Anadike-Uzomah. That's the other reason why, I wouldn't necessarily be enamored with the idea of bringing back Frank Clark on the 53. Is that, do you really want to put another body in front of Felix on the depth chart? A guy who could potentially be taking snaps from him. I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a guy that you want to develop, and I think that the Chiefs would really like it if they could get a rotation where they've got George Karlaftis and Mike Dan as their starters, and then that alternate group with Omenihu and Felix that can come in and relieve those guys and kind of be a shift change, like I said, Joe Cohen was talking about earlier. That I think would be their best idea. And okay, could Frank then come in? I mean, you got Malik Herring, who could also be a rotational piece. I think Frank Clark would be great depth, but I mean, if he's willing to come in on the practice squad, that's what I think would be the best solution for everybody. So, we will see if there's any development there. Like I said, there's something could happen Thursday night, but it sounds more and more like it's either going to be late tonight or Friday, more likely that Frank is going to be in the building and meeting with the Chiefs for the physical. So we'll see if there's any developments then. Looking through to see if there's any other questions that we've gotten on social media from everybody that anybody's got anything. And if you got anything, obviously hit it up in the comments. I'll be glad to answer some of your questions. That's what we're doing tonight, is talking about some of the roster moves and the changes. And I do see we got more Frank Clark questions. Have we checked in with Frank? There's a question talking about asking about Sky Moore and how that might affect Mecole Hardman. That actually is intriguing. And one thing I thought, if you haven't seen it, I did post a video on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, this afternoon of Mecole giving a big hug to Sky Moore. I mean, you could definitely see Mecole was happy to be back with a familiar face, and seeing Sky. So that's, I think it will be. I think Kevin Mecole back could be good for Sky. I think having them both on the field at the same time would be interesting. And yeah, I mean, is it taking a little bit off of Sky's plate? Yeah, but you know what? I think in a good way because, I mentioned earlier about, whether or not that the Tyreek Hill role in this Chiefs offense still exists. And I'm not sure that exactly as the way Tyreek played it, that it does. But, that's something that Mecole would have been stepping into. Well, when Mecole went down last year and now this year, I mean, the Chiefs have really been trying to make Sky that guy. I mean, with a lot of the jet sweeps and the orbits and putting him in motion. And, no knock against Sky because I think he's a talented receiver. I think there is a lot of upside, but I just don't know that that's the best role for him. I think that's a role best suited for guys with a little bit more speed, like Tyreek and like Mecole. So I mean, I think there's some definite, possibilities with the Chiefs, and like I said, their jet sweeps, pop passes, those emotions that Mecole is so good at. Um, Sky has run them, but I'm just not sure he's as good at it as Tyreek and Mecole were. And if that means that Sky can, be used in other ways that I think he's better suited, I think that can only be upside for Sky. Cody's got another interesting question that I haven't considered. I have not asked anyone, but it's relevant. A fun question. Do the Chiefs not want players to wear 0? That is very intriguing to me because, all NFL teams have, a lack of numbers. And so like during training camp, you'll often see, some players with duplicate numbers on offense and defense. Every once in a while, you'll see a practice squad player with a duplicate number during the season, but not very often. The Chiefs have a bigger problem with that than most NFL teams because the Chiefs have retired a lot of numbers. So that's one reason why the Chiefs don't retire many numbers anymore. It's the reason why 88 still gets recycled and used from time to time because, they just don't have enough numbers to retire anymore. Now that the NFL has liberalized some of the number usage, that makes it easier. But one thing we really haven't seen is a 0. And I think Cody's hitting on it there. I'm not sure how much of a fan Andy Reid is of a guy wearing 0. I think he's a little bit too traditional for that. I mean, we've seen him, hey, at least give a little bit on some players wearing non-traditional numbers. Brian Cook wearing 6. We're seeing a little bit of it, but yeah, I feel like I'd be glad to ask him one day, but I have a feeling that might be a bridge too far for Andy Reid having a guy wear 0. It's just one number, and I feel like if anybody was going to do it, it would have been during training camp, but the Chiefs haven't done that. So I'm intrigued. That's a good question. I would like to see that and see if but that's my guess. I think you're right that for Andy Reid that just might be a little bit too far. Looking to see if there's any more questions anybody's got and there's another actually number question about Mecole wearing 12. There was apparently an effort to try and get him 17. I don't think that was, Richie James not wanting to give 17 up. If I'm not mistaken, because this is what I thought beforehand, that you can't change numbers during the season without like a roster change. I mean, if a player was on the 53 and got released and comes back, they can get a different number. But I don't think you can give up and change a player's number just like during the season. So I think that's what ended up putting the kibosh on Mecole wearing 17 and he goes to 12 instead. Good friend there. How about those Chiefs? Always appreciate the support. Would Patrick Mahomes seriously have been the backup punter in the Broncos game? I think Tobe was serious. I know that Patrick does like the kick, and he has talked about his prowess, and I think he would prefer to do it as in like a shotgun formation rather than a full punter formation. That I don't think he's ready for. I think it would be certainly pooch kick kind of positioning, just maybe a one step and drop from a shotgun. I think they seriously would have considered it. I talked to Justin Reed to see if he could do it. He said as a punter, he's more of a rugby style kicker, so he would have to have a little bit of a run at it off to the side. So I think the Chiefs would probably have to have changed their blocking scheme a little bit. For if any of you are Mizzou Tiger fans from back in the day, the Chiefs or the Tigers rather, I guess, and Dave Tope might have still been there. I don't remember. When Corby Jones was a quarterback, the Tigers used the pooch punt quite a bit with Corby at quarterback. That's the role that I could envision Patrick doing it. And let's be real. I mean, Patrick is just a heck of an athlete. I mean, if he says he can kick, I'm going to believe that he can kick. Because he can pretty much do just about anything else. He's a decent basketball player. He's obviously a good baseball player. He can do it pretty much all. So if he says he can kick, I think he can kick. I would not be surprised about that. It's the other positions that I think is a little bit more difficult. Hey, we've seen Justin Reed. Justin Reed's a decent emergency kicker. Your emergency holders and emergency long snappers in the NFL are a lot to be desired. I can say Travis Kelce is the best second long snapper the Chiefs have. And they will never put Travis Kelce at long snapper. He might want to do it. I don't know. Maybe at his age, he doesn't want to do it anymore. But having seen him long snap and some of the other guys that they've tried, he's the best. But it's still, you don't want to see a backup long snapper or a backup holder in a Chiefs game because it would be pretty scary. One thing I wanted to kind of finish with too is talking about the NFL trade deadline. That's going to be coming up in 12 days, October 31st. And there's always going to be more and more rumors. I mean, the trade deadline is becoming a bigger and bigger deal every season. It certainly seems like teams are getting more and more into the concept of, if you're buried and the season's become lost, moving some of your talent for draft picks, especially guys who are going to be free agents. If you can get back more compensation than you will for the compensation pick that you'll get a year later. I mean, getting a pick faster and helping you rebuild more quickly is a good deal. So you see teams more interested in making deals. And the Chiefs have the draft picks. I mean, they haven't moved a lot of selections. So certainly for you're talking about 24, 25, 26, as far as the resources you could have to maybe go get some guys, they've got the ability to do that. I'm just not sure that the salary cap is going to be helping them to do that. Whomever they go out and get, it would have to be somebody pretty affordable. So I just think that would be difficult, and and honestly, I'm not sure that I see the real need anywhere in particular. How about those Chiefs? Asking that question, that brings me right to it. Where did the Chiefs need some depth? Possibly, I mean, you could look at. If you're talking about offensive line, I think the only place you'd really be talking about would be an additional swing tackle. But I think the Chiefs are relatively comfortable with what they've got. And once again, I mean, a swing tackle better than what the Chiefs have would probably be salary-wise a little bit more expensive than they can afford right now. And I mean, for all the times that we've talked in recent past about the Chiefs defense needing an influx of talent, I just don't see the need this year. The linebacker group is better than I think it has been in a long time and deeper. There's nobody in the defensive secondary that I would say needs an upgrade. The defensive line, about the only thing you could possibly say is that you could always use more bodies. But, if Frank Clark comes in and is able to play, and was able to take a practice squad spot, that's a great solution to me. So I just don't know if I see the need. Now, another great point from how about those Chiefs, could the Chiefs be sellers? Possibly. But again, I mean, I don't know. I mean, trading a receiver, since they have so many, I'm not sure that anybody in that Chiefs receiver group is probably as valuable as maybe the Chiefs have them. Even a guy like a Justin Ross, I mean, I'm not sure that another team, because remember, there's a lot of NFL teams that think that Justin Ross is still a medical liability. So, there'd be a lot of teams that would just steer away from that standpoint on a guy like Justin Ross, despite the upside. So you might be a little bit limited in what the audience would be there. And there's probably going to be some teams that think, hey, if the Chiefs made a move to bring another wide receiver, maybe one of those guys, eventually gets placed on waivers or becomes available another way. So I don't know if there's a huge leverage as far as the Chiefs have in making a deal for moving their own guys in exchange for draft picks. I mean, Brett Veach is going to listen to anybody. I mean, he's Trader Brett for a reason. He will explore everything, and if there's a player that becomes available in the next 12 days, that's somebody that they've been interested in the past, he will get interested in a hurry. I just have a hard time right now with seeing any of the speculated trades that have been out there from some of the big sites. PFF does their what would be a good trade, and some other places too. A lot of them just either don't work from a salary cap standpoint, or I just can't see the Chiefs making a move. I mean, wide receiver is the only position that I think you'd say would make sense. But then again, I mean, Chiefs have a lot of numbers there now, and I'm just not sold that anybody can come in and pick up an Andy Reid offense and make a meaningful contribution. I mean, once again, like I said earlier in the show, Kadarius Toney, I think, is your poster child for a mid-season replacement receiver. And does that addition move the needle? I'm just not sold. And this Chiefs offense, it struggles right now in the red zone. They'll tell you it's execution, that it's not personnel, that it's just a matter of guys making some plays, that they've made some mistakes. It's maybe a little bit still of this receiver group not being on the same page. Certainly, despite how well Travis Kelce has played, his injuries, the absence has absolutely made a difference in the red zone. I don't think there's any doubt. I'm still a little bit surprised that they haven't given Justin Ross a few more opportunities in the red zone. We saw in the preseason that he can be a weapon down there. I always felt like some of the same things that the Chiefs designed up with Jody Fortson would be ideal for Justin Ross. Let's see if they get to some of those things. I mean, I know they're in the playbook. We'll see, but that's the only thing. I mean, the Chiefs, with the deficiencies that they think that they have right now, which I can say offensively, the biggest thing that they feel like that they're missing is just simply execution in the red zone, and that's not going to be solved with a trade. So I think they'll like I said, they'll be in the market. They will certainly listen. They'll take a look at what's out there, but I'm just not sold that they think that there is going to be a need to make anything, unless there's just a player that pops up who's been on their radar for a while that they really like. We will see. Always enjoys doing these. Enjoy the questions and the conversation. You always, guys, gals, always have some great stuff on here. Appreciate the Pat. Probably will be a race car driver one day. That is. I'll leave with one quick parting thought, because this whole F1 thing and Patrick Mahomes and him talking about wanting to be an NFL owner. I mean, on the one hand, I can see Patrick playing for as long as he can and needs to make money, because I know he would love to own an NFL team. He'd love to have the resources to do that, and obviously he's well on his way to having that kind of money. But that might be the only thing. The one thing is that Patrick loves a challenge, and there's kind of part of me that always just wonders if there gets to the point where he just doesn't feel like playing football as much of a challenge anymore, and that's so. I don't know. I mean, competitively, I could see Patrick Mahomes pulling Tom Brady and playing until he's 46. I can also see him saying, "Wait a minute, you know what? I can solve my competitiveness in something else that's more challenging, like trying to win F1 races, and he's trying to build a soccer team from scratch, or moving into something else." I mean, I can definitely see Patrick looking for another challenge sometime. But nobody wants to think about Patrick Mahomes, walking away. But he's too much fun to watch, and I'm sure he will be fun watching as a race car owner. You all are very kind. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks, everybody. And as always, I mean, feel free to leave your comments and questions on here. I do try to always come back and see if there's any questions afterwards and answer them as well. So feel free to keep firing away. You see me on social media, hit me up there too. And we'll try and do more of these. I want to try and get in a pattern of doing one of these a week. So hopefully we can get into that, and we will see you all later. But I appreciate you, everybody, popping in for tonight, and we will see you next time.